Welcome to the Graphic Sales Stories podcast. I'm Tom Stearns.
I'm Peter Cleary.
Yeah. And this time we're talking about the joy of cold calling. Right? This is a comic.
And I think the title itself is mocking.
Yes, it's definitely meant to be ironic. This is linked below, by the way. I'm not going to leave it up long enough for you to reread it here, folks. So if you're not familiar with this one, click the link below, pause the video, and then come back and watch the rest of this.
Yeah, pull that back up for a second, because I always want to say this. But while we're talking, you guys can look at this. I always feel that Ollie is giving the finger.
Oh, right.
right there below on the second panel. Every time I look at him, like, I think he's flipping her off. Anyway, all right.
We got to ask Eli if that was
the intended
flip off. I don't think we ever asked him about that.
Yes.
But okay, this subject's near and dear to me because I guess over the last 8 or 9 years of my consultancy, I've done a lot of SDR team stand up. I do a ton of cold call coaching, among other things. But I've got a whole training course on just cold outbound that includes calling and email. And I know, Peter, you've also made quite a few cold calls.
Oh, your sales, it's all metrics based. You got to make 200 calls to get 2 appointments and 200 calls a day, and it should only take you like an hour. The metrics. I also grew up at a time when it was a little bit different, definitely different than today, what you do for work, but it's just smiling and dialing. I've got some stories about that.
So speaking of the metrics, I mean, you on LinkedIn, pretty common to see cold calling is dead, and then there's a big fight about it. Look, I don't work with every client in America, North America, or Europe, but the numbers have held consistent for the last 6 to 8 years. You're still connecting mostly at 6%. If you're pretty good on the phones, you convert at 15 to 20% of those conversations. You're booking your 10 to 15 meetings or 5 to 10 meetings on the phones alone. Yeah. It's a channel that still produces for people that embrace it and deal with the joy of cold calling.
It is the thing that, today in today's world, why people kind of like cold calling is dead, is because it is harder to get people on the phone. But that's actually why it's more important to actually understand how to address it, like what you're going to say on the phone, practice it, and not kind of, I still remember the early days when it's cold calling and you got somebody live, then you're stumbling like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting to get somebody. So now I'm just frazzled and I don't know what to do. So you've got to be prepared. Like it is. I was just talking to my daughter about this. I'm like, it is a simple, selling is simple, but it's the simplest, hardest thing you can do, because if you're just, what needs to be done, but psychologically and to focus and to do it, like you don't like to cold call, but you have to set a time, so mine was, I think it was 8 in the morning to about noontime for lunch. Every day you go in and you had to be prepared. You have to be like, this call could go through. I could get somebody live here. Well, who am I calling? Why am I calling them? What's the benefit? And, 198 of the 200 calls, you get nothing. So it's just mentally exhausting. Every single call, you're like, why am I calling this guy? What's the benefit here? So it's hard to do, but what you need to do is simple. Like, just make those calls and be prepared when you get there. And you mentioned something that's right. I think individually, your stats change, right? If you get better at it, my later in my career in sales, I got much better of, understanding I'm not trying to sell the product on the phone, but I'm trying to sell the meeting, right? I'm just trying to get the appointment, and that's the goal of this. So once you kind of simplify why you're talking to the person, it simplifies the conversation with them. It's much quicker, and you get to that result what you want sooner. But you have to kind of learn and go through the experiences of like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, absolutely. With cold calling, you can get better, right? It takes time. It takes practice. There's one rep that I worked with for a couple of years where he was consistent, right? 60 dials every day. He wanted to be coached, and we tracked all his numbers.
Only 60 calls a day? Come on. Pick it up.
This team was 60 dials, which seems to be a bit of an average. But you could see his his connect rate was consistent, went up and down a little bit, 5 to 6%, but his conversation to meeting rate with coaching, ebbed and flowed a little bit, but it steadily went up from as a new hire, from ramping 11%, then 13%, then 18%. And then it would dip again, and we'd meet and we'd listen, and we're like, Tom, you changed your open. Why did you do that? Oh, it didn't work a couple times. So I kind of lost some confidence. So I did this instead. And I'm like, Tom, like, let's go back to the basics. You're bringing your like, we have a kind of an approach for opening that I like to work on. And he goes back to it. His numbers go back up. So, it is a numbers game. And if you see the numbers and you hang in there, it becomes a really, really steady stream of meetings.
Yeah.
So I'm still a fan. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. And then there's also the catch. So, I wasn't SDRs, making the appointments for myself and going out there. So you always had to, there's a couple of different people you saw around the office. And there was one, who would take any meeting whatsoever because they just wanted to make a meeting. And I'm like, well, they're not they're not selling anything because they're not value added. Like just meeting with somebody to meet with somebody is just such a waste of time. But that was just like their win. It's like, oh, I get to go on an appointment, leave the office and go get something. And the others are people who didn't like the cold calling. So they're like, I want to be a farmer. I don't want to be a hunter. I don't want to go out and get my own stuff. I want to basically have an account that I just build into because they always thought it was easier and whatever because they didn't like the cold calling because cold calling, a lot of people just don't. You have to get in the habit. And the metrics are really important to cold calling. I do believe that. I'm a very data centric person, but why is something working? Why is something not working? What are you doing differently? How many calls do I have to make? And for mine, I started out roughly around 200 calls a day, just kind of trying to get through to somebody. But because my hit ratio of making the appointment was much higher, I could make less calls to get to that. Yeah. So my goal was always to have between 5 or 6 appointments a week. And that seemed to, for me, the close ratio and the numbers I was looking at always allowed me to hit my number. If I could have the consistency of about 15 to 20 appointments a month, I could get and generate that funnel and get enough business in there. So I was I don't know what in my life changed me to be a process and data person, but I'm very process oriented and data oriented right now because I definitely was not process and data oriented when I was in college.
Yeah, the numbers let's stay on the numbers for a second because they are so important because so many times I end up working with a client and I hear, oh, cold calling doesn't work for us, or it doesn't work for our industry, or it doesn't work for this reason. And I said, well, let's look at your numbers. And like statistically, there's no possibility they're hitting their meeting numbers because they're maybe making 3 or 4 dials a day. Or when I talk to someone, they don't want to talk to me. So, I get more via email. But if you actually track the numbers and you make the effort, you do the math, or you do that 60 dials at a 6% connect rate, which you can do if you have mobile numbers, that you're going to have 3.5 conversations. You convert at like a 20%, you're going to hit that 10 meeting target a month, which is kind of what an SDR target is on the phone alone, let alone email. But there's no one, it's not being given the effort, and also the reps are maybe not studying their own numbers and seeing like, hey, I am getting better. I am getting meetings this way.
Do you have stats like calling versus LinkedIn requests versus email requests? You kind of like, hey, you're getting, your LinkedIn requests, you're getting 2% hits, your emails, you get 1%, and cold calling, you get 6%. Do you have those type of numbers to say, this is why? Like because I hear all the time, like social media, that's the way you got to get these meetings. I'm like, I get hit every day with social media, with LinkedIn requests to meet, and I don't even respond. I'm like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, the smartest reps stick with the phones because it is the most predictable. It's also the easiest one to track, where you're seeing right there. So the model I teach and follow is you do your research, right? There's a level of account research and contact research because it'll benefit whether you leave a voicemail, whether they answer the phone, whether you send an email, whether you connect on LinkedIn. So you do that research and it fuels any of those channels. The phone happens to be the most predictable because like, hey, if I make 60 dials and I get, like, you can see the outcome with email, right? It's, it can be more tedious because like templates don't really work. You do need to, to dig in and personalize. One stat that is fairly interesting, and another reason to kind of sell folks on calling, is that multi-channel outreach, all of the numbers are better. If you call and you leave a voicemail, some percentage of voicemail, your email open rates increase. If you send email, your answer rate, your callback rate increases. Same with like LinkedIn. If you're using LinkedIn and email and phone, all of those metrics tick up over time. So multi-channel is statistically, from what I see, again, I study some industry data, but a lot of it's my client data. The more multi-channel, the better everything plays out. And most sequences are asking for that. But no, I don't think it's, one channel. Well, I could go off on LinkedIn too. The risk with LinkedIn is that if that's all you focus on, right, and you're an outbounder, one is that you're personally damaging your own potential professional network, because LinkedIn sticks with you throughout your career.
Yeah.
Where, email and phone stays with the company. So you burn your total addressable market. You send out 10,000, whatever. And all those people that like have no respect for you because you pitch slapped them via LinkedIn, those people could have been a network to help you find new jobs, better jobs, things like that.
Yeah.
It's not your company's network. So I know this is cold calling. I'll get off LinkedIn.
That was pitch slap, right? Pitch slap.
Pitch slap with a P.
Talk about statistics. I know when statistically, from a callback ratio, my wife has a better, if she texts me and instantly calls me, she'll get a quicker response from me than if she just texts or just calls. So usually I get the text with a follow-up phone call and I'll answer like, this must be important. Oh, you're at the grocery store? Yeah, I'll take a tomato.
I'll remember that when I try to get a hold of you.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Hey, one thing I wanted to talk about. So the comic itself is The Joy of Cold Calling, and basically the lesson in there is that no matter, even as good as you are at everything, it still can suck, right? It still can be hard. And there's a story that I like to tell to reps about myself around that. You're going to have a bad experience at some point, right? You're going to get hung up on, right? You're going to, be yelled at or something, oftentimes to no fault of your own, sometimes for your own fault. So, okay, here's a story. Late 90s, I'm living in San Francisco. I'm a recruiter. I'm making $10.50 an hour. I'm broke as well. And I call a candidate, and as a recruiter,
can you live in San Francisco for $10.50 an hour?
Well, I was working a couple of jobs at the time. Still wasn't enough to pay. And this is the late 90s. So yes, it's not as expensive now. Okay. But there are a couple kinds of recruiting firms, by the way. There's contingency recruiting firms at the time, and retainer, and then some blend of the two. But contingency are like, the lower class kind of recruiter, right? You're contingent, you're not thought of well in the industry. So I call the candidate. He's interested. I'm collecting information. I ask the question, what's your current salary? Now, any salary is going to sound amazing to me because I don't have one. And he says, oh, I'm making this. And I immediately react with, well, you're doing okay, aren't you? And there's a pause. And I know I'm an idiot. That's not the right thing to say to anybody, but my financial circumstance was like, wow, that's so much money. Anyways, he said to me, you sound like one of those contingency guys. And I say, that sounds like an insult. He said, it was meant to be. Click. And and I'm like, that one stung, even though I deserved it. All my colleagues are laughing their butts off at that one. And so the takeaway there is that, look, I still remember that first one back in 1997, and there have been many more since, I think, but I don't remember them. So if you're doing this, yeah, it's going to happen. Sometimes it's not going to be your own fault. Mine was my own fault, but you got to let it go. You'll remember the first one. After that, learn something from it, spend 2 seconds learning, and move on. Because if you dwell on it, yes, the job will become torturous.
One thing I always tell my people I hire and stuff that work for me is, it's only a mistake if you don't learn from it. Other than that, it's a great learning experience. So you had a great learning experience, Tom.
I still remember it to this day. It still bugs me. I'm like, it's my own fault.
Yeah. Yeah, the cold calling thing is always so brutal. I told an earlier story about the guy lying and saying it was Cam Neely and found a guy's wallet to get the appointment. They try to talk to the decision maker, which is always great. But trying to get and talk to, and when you're picking up and talking to a decision maker is always like, trying to get the right person and set the appointment. It is hard. And there's so many. Again, I did like 200 calls a day. So the morning was set for calling, and the afternoon was either appointments or door knocking, right? And we talked about that. You and I are older, so we could go into a building and knock doors and ask questions. But the cold calling, I started setting up different industries to call at different times when they were available, and doing a lot more research. And so the research is also extremely important. So I think I told a story when we had that story about me forgetting, going through the story, and I forgot to bring the paperwork, and the woman asked me what's next, and I went on so we had that cartoon, which is a great one. But I did research in the building and found out, I had heard about it because there was a newspaper article that this building used to lose all its power in telecom when it rained. So they found out all the names of the customers in the building and would call. One thing I left out of that story is that person, the reason why she ended up talking to me is because I called multiple times. And she was on my Rolodex. So kids, Rolodex is this thing that has there's people's information on it that you're rolled. And I did have a Rolodex. Actually, it was a flat one. It had to go through like this with all kinds of notes and right. So I had left her messages. So she actually knew my name and knew where I was calling from because I did the multi-channel. Like I was knocking doors and calling because we didn't have LinkedIn or that stuff. But that does work. It's the messaging. It was the same message over like, hey, I understand you lose your telephone services when it rains. I want to talk to you. So I actually was able to sit down with her because I had set up previously the information by leaving her voicemails throughout the year. So it works. It's hard. It's hard though. It is hard.
And it's hard.
It's not fun every single day knowing you got to get up and make, smile and dial. The one thing I would tell you, so we had the bosses that you had at this time when you're just this end of a salesperson. They're all kinds of crazy, wacky people, and we used to have contests, right? So that everybody had to make phone calls, and the whole day would be set around everybody making phone calls, and whoever made the most appointments won certain prizes, whatever. But this one manager, my manager, would take away your chair. He's like, it's called thinking on your feet, not thinking on your seat. So you'd have to stand, you'd lose your chair, and you just stand there for 8 hours, smiling and dialing and calling and doing things. I'm like, I think I could do this from a chair. But no, everybody from his team, the chairs got away. And then the other thing he used to do is he would tape you into so you get like the cautionary tape, put it into your cube, like kind of like lock you into your cube, like you're there for 4 hours. Make your 4-hour call, standing there and making calls, and make sure and so you had to build up your Rolodex and make sure you had who you're going to call and all that type of stuff. Yeah, I went through all that stuff.
We had a stand up, like one of those cardboard stand-ups. We did like an ad campaign years ago, and we had one of those cardboard stand-ups made of the CFO. Like he was a model in an early ad campaign we did. So for some reason we had made like a giant stand-up of him. And the reps, like the CFO was obviously the grumpiest, the most difficult guy in the building. He was the CFO. And the sales reps, when they wanted to make calls and not be interrupted, would drag that in front of their cube. So Mark, was basically, hey, keep out. Instead of the caution tape, we had the Mark Girolamo sign that you put in front of your cube so people would leave you alone while you're making cold calls. I have a friend, Craig Herman, who's been a CRO a bunch of times, but he loved the call blitz. And I was consulting to one of his companies, and we had like a AE, AM, BDR call blitz, and he did it every quarter. And this one woman, Michelle Laker, like the first call blitz, she did something like 362 calls in one day and was woozy, and not a lot of meetings booked, but she learned. And then we had another one a quarter later, and she did 467, like some astronomical number. And I'm being specific because I think it was 467. But she also got a lot of meetings from that. And I was like, what did you do differently? And she had learned what you kind of indicated. She had she used time zones, verticals. She organized her lists by time zones, verticals, accounts, and account research, so she could be more strategic, more efficient, more personalized, and actually booked quite a few meetings out of that versus just a lot of activity. So some of those call blitzes, I think, where you got to do an extreme amount,
Yeah.
will make the daily amount easier. So that's a good way to get better at it.
Yeah. We had set up when I was the director of sales engineering. I worked with our VP and created a program, and myself and this guy Rick Frieda, who worked for me as a manager out in the Pennsylvania area, we came up with what we call the target account profile, and we went. This whole program that we built was from hiring the right people to all the way, like what type of customer buys from us and who's most likely to buy from us, why are they most likely to buy from us, and then we took it from there, saying, okay, then we had a contest of creating the best PowerPoint presentation to fit to that people, why, like what the benefits are, whole thing, and we scale it down. But from a calling standpoint, we created this Excel spreadsheet that if you put in 5 pieces of information, it basically was a target, and it would basically close in and say, this is going to be a better target for you. And then we had a close ratio to the point where we could say, like, okay, if this customer has AT&T and they meet these things, you're going to have an 80% close ratio. So when you're calling them, say these things. These are the things these customers want to hear and what their issues are. So we got really to your point, like the data and the specifics and planning for this stuff. We got really specific, saying, when you call a customer, these are the issues they're running into today. This is what you're going to say to them about what problem you're going to solve for them. And we guarantee you'll have a very high ratio of appointments. And those appointments have a very, very, and again, the AT&T thing was big. Like, if you fit these things, once you get the appointments, 80% close ratio. After a year, we pulled the stats. Like,
Wow.
Verizon was 60% because they had mobile and they did something else, but AT&T was really high on the list of, like, we can win this business by going after these type of business. And the business actually by chain was very high end. So customers, so sales reps were used to selling, like going after and selling small stuff. We realized, like, we have a better chance of selling, instead of going after $3,000 or $4,000 a month deals. We have these $20,000 to $30,000 to $40,000 opportunities per customer going after these, and it's a much higher level of close ratio. So being prepared, the whole reason we're talking about this, being prepared, understanding who you're going after, what to say to them, why it's important to get on the phone, on the call, but being prescriptive and having it written down. And so then you can understand the obstacles. Now it's more of a conversation. So even though it's written down, and you're really trying to follow that formula, it becomes more conversational, because when you're asking the same things and presenting to them what you're solving for, the questions become the same. And analytics and all the stuff that's come out, people think, especially the time we didn't have the data that we have today, but everybody thought they were unique. Like, every company is like, we have to do something different, than our competition. I'm like, no, you don't. You do everything the same. All your problems are exactly the same. So your issue you're going to talk to me about is going to be the same issue that the guy just called down the street, same issue, because it's in the same industry. So we had a lot of success, and I loved that program and putting that together, and having the partners and the teams, the sales teams that really focused on it, did extremely well. Was great, and that's why I went to Hawaii.
It paid off. There, folks. There's the reason to do it. You can go to Hawaii.
You can go to Hawaii.
One of the things I like about cold calling so much for young sales reps, I know there's career BDRs. People do it throughout their career. Some people love it, but it's a good foundational skill. If you can learn to have a fruitful conversation with somebody in a cold outbound scenario, then as you graduate to, say, a closing role, or you're running discovery calls, your conversations are even more comfortable. So if you go from you're just sending email and booking meetings, and now you want to be an account executive and you've never learned really to talk to anybody, and now you have to run a 30-minute discovery call where you really have to, you have to be able to ask more questions and go deeper and things like that. You've got a longer way to go. So starting with cold calling, you'll learn to have the hardest conversation, and keep it going.
Yeah.
And now you'll have confidence as you move into a closing role. If you're booking meetings in that kind of organization, now that you move into closing, now those discovery conversations where you got somebody for 30 minutes to really talk about business, you're much more comfortable.
Yeah.
You can't go from text, email, LinkedIn messaging to, hey, I'm going to have a fruitful conversation with somebody for 30 minutes. You're just missing a development opportunity. So embrace the outbound cold call, in my opinion.
Yeah, we had one of the stories I love. There's a guy. I should come up with a name for him because I don't want to use his real name, because there's so many stories about this guy. It's this guy. So let's call him Tom. So Tom had a lot of problems, and so he was a new hire at this time, and I was listening to him on the phone, and he wasn't good. He just wasn't good. So I pulled him into the conference. So this is it was in Boston. I was the engineering director, but I would go in the office after a while. And I heard this guy on the phone. I'm like, oh, I'm like, you're not doing it right. So we got on the phone, and he was a very arrogant guy. And he's like, if you're so good, why don't you call this company? I can't get in front of him. I'm like, all right, I'll call. So happened to get the guy on the phone. I was asking some really good questions. And this is part of the whole thing is this guy was trying to sell them on the phone, which is you're not trying to do. So introduced myself, said, hey, got some questions about the way you're running a network. This is what we're seeing in the industry. So can I ask some questions? The guy's like, sure, fine. And we ended up having a good conversation. The conversation lasted for about half an hour. And during the conversation, what we were talking about, I ended up saying, hey, you know what? I have a specialist for the problem you're having. So we got down to the point where I understood his specific issue with the way his network was running. I'm like, I got a specialist, and this guy Dan, who was unbelievable, and he was a director of our complex engineering design. So I called Dan, and Dan also was an unbelievable salesperson. So I get Dan on the phone, and I explained to the situation. Dan and him have a good conversation. He's asking good questions, and Dan goes, you know what? I'm going to go and reserve the network capacity for you, so you could, you guys should probably meet with Peter, but I'm going to reserve this for the next 30 to 60 days, so you can have it when you sign up for us. And he basically just made that like, when you sign up, this will be ready for you. So he said, great, good talking to you. Click hang up. We set up the meeting. I hang up the phone, and this guy, I shouldn't say this guy Tom.
It's Tom.
This guy Tom was like, he's like, you just got to get lucky there. That's that same thing would have happened to me. I'm like, no, you're not understanding. It was questioning. So it was a comfortable conversation. It was asking him questions about his business. I go, you had good information about what this customer did, but you don't. We're asking, you're not really setting yourself and asking questions of why and here and this. And I go, I've been doing this for a long time. I knew his industry, so. And it ended up, and I'll tell you the reason why I'll have a lot of stories about Tom. So we ended up closing the business, and it was about $25,000 a month. The guy was on ramp, so he crushed it and he made some huge money. And he just would go around the office bragging about how great he was as a sales rep. And I just wanted to pull him aside. Like, you did nothing, dude. You did nothing. You sat, you did the quoting we asked you to do, and that was it. So you had the guy's number, which is great, but you didn't cold call it. You didn't sit in the meeting. You didn't close the business. So stop. Don't be so arrogant. But anyway, the point is, I'm great. The second point is having that conversation, knowing what the industry is, and asking and having and developing. Just have a conversation with the guy. And don't be nervous, and just be relaxed, because it's just a conversation.
Yeah, it's just a conversation, right? The goal. I try to get the mindset for the reps I work with to think like, hey, look, your goal is to just have a good conversation, right? Yeah. Engagement. That's what we're going for. How do we do that? A little bit of preparation, and we're getting them focused on answering relevant questions. It's never the pitch, by the way. You kind of sell on the question, right?
Yeah.
And the more
100% it is asking the right question is so valuable.
And listening, right? And then, business acumen helps, which means you understand why you're asking that question, right? That helps. So good training, like, hey, this is why that question's relevant. And then really listening and following them. And that's where the magic always happens in sales. It's never, your question if you're asking a question, a smart person on the other end of the line is going to realize that you can solve something related to the problem that question got to. So it's not about really, like, pitching is the last thing you need to really be good
Yeah.
at. Yeah.
And by the way, every time I think about the sales process and what you should be saying, one of the things that not to do, but I think is hysterical because it's subtle. It's just in the movie. There's such a subtle thing about good salespeople. And why this picks up. Did you ever? So Old School, when they're trying to kick off, Vince Vaughn has all the people there trying to kick off the fraternity in the house, and they're in the kitchen, and he's trying to get Mitch to buy into the fraternity things. And he's like, "Did you have a good time the other night?" He's like, "Yeah, I had a great time the other night." He's like, "Okay, so don't you want that good times to continue?" And I'm like, "That's such a sales. He's such the cheesy salesperson. So wouldn't you want those good times to continue? Is that a feeling?" And he's like, "I don't know." And every time I see that, I'm like, such a cheesy sales pitch.
Details here. Look, did you or did you not have a good time at the party?
I had an awesome time.
Frank, I know that you had an awesome time. Okay? I think the entire town knows that you had an awesome time. I'm trying to ask Mitch whether or not he had an awesome time.
Yeah, I had a good time.
Okay, that's good. And now, wouldn't you want those good times to keep going? Never more?
That's why he's the beeper store king or whatever. He's got the electronics thing of like, you're just that cheesy sales sales pitch.
Which has gotten old real fast, right? People don't want to say yes to salespeople because of that guy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many great sales. Speaking of those kind of cold calling sales movies, I always like the Boiler Room clip where he gets called because
For the newspaper.
The newspaper, right?
Yeah.
And that, by the way, that kind of is a good parallel to the actual comic. Like, as good a job, like, even the other big takeaway here, folks, and the point of this is that, yes, cold calling does work. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's going to work every time. It's
not a joy,
and you still get shot down. One story on this. So with a lot of my clients, we would, more before COVID, we would do live cold calling. We go through training, we train reps on cold calling, and we do a live cold calling session. And, there's nothing more terrifying than cold calling on speakerphone. So you're combining public speaking, your peers are in the room and you're cold calling at the same time. So it's maybe a little cruel, but we would do that. But I would go first. And I have quite a few success stories where I went first and actually booked the meeting right out of the gate, which was great. But this one time I met a client in Toronto. I call the customer, they pick up, I get hit with like an objection. I lock up Peter, totally freeze, right? And like fumble the whole thing and it's over. Right. And I'm turning bright red, probably like I look around and the guys are like, aren't you supposed to be teaching us this? And I'm like, guys, I've been doing this a long time. Occasionally still run into a brick wall, right? And that is the ironic joy of cold calling, right? It's going to happen to everybody. Or maybe I just happen to suck at it that day.
And it happens. You wake up and you're like, you're not feeling it. And so much, just the last before we start talking about the comic itself, but I mean, you can hear in people's voice, right? That's why I was like, my boss was like, smile and dial, because they can hear your smile, they can hear your energy, they can hear, like, you call them like, hey, this is what I'm doing, like they know, like, you're not even excited about what you're talking about. Why am I talking to you? So so it does, like, if you wake up and you're not feeling well and you're just kind of grumpy, like, it's going to come across. People will hear that.
Before you dial, stand up, right? Let it go in between. All these things have been taught for 100 years, or as long as maybe 2,000 years, as long as sales have been on. But yeah, they work. Smile before you dial, let it go, talk yourself up in the mirror, stand, project, walk around, and just keep going and keep going. It does still work despite everything you read on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the comic. Let's get back to Ollie giving the woman the finger. One of the things I would tell you a story. So is from the so you guys know that Eli is our fantastic artist here, and we'll write the stories, but he'll give us kind of like he'll ask for feedback and throw some things out here. And one of the things, we had the woman say she's going to be going on vacation, and I remember Eli coming back and saying, well, that's not really a business thing. That nobody would really say that they're going on vacation. It's like we should have more of like she's late for a business meeting. And I'm like, no, this is actually what you get. Like these people actually say this. And so like while I can understand what you're saying, I'm like, this is truthfully what you get. You get people just giving you excuses upon excuses, whatever they can to just hang up on you. So we kind of went through here and just but that was one of the things I remember him come back. He's like, she should be late for a meeting. Like, no, let's keep with vacation, because it ties into my whole thing that I say at the end. But the B, I'm like, I have told people like, no, I'm not gonna be around. I'm going on vacation. I'm not gonna be here. And don't call me.
Yeah, this has all happened, right? This is countless times this happens before, or happens again and again. A couple of things to zero in. Again, Eli, just amazing. I mean, this looks like Peter, right? And this looks like most of our calls. Peter not paying attention to me.
I get fidgety. I had that thing for the longest time. I had one of those things, and my team would be like, could you stop? Because it's really annoying. Like, I got to be doing something. I'm a very, very fidgety guy.
I love the phone too. This was like a happy accident. So I don't know if you've read the comic or you caught this, but I'm late for a meeting, and you look at the clock, and it's not that, like, some people have meetings at odd hours, but usually they're at the top of the hour at 3:30 or something. So I picked this time, and I said, let's put 3:17 on the clock. She says she's late for a meeting. It's like, well, what meeting started at 3:15 or, it's 3:17. And he comes back. He's like, that was really brilliant. I'm like, what? He's like, if you turn 3:17 upside down, it spells lie. And I was like, yeah, that's right. That's why I chose that time.
I did. Actually, I never even realized that. Now I can't not see it. I can't not see
it. Yeah. Of course, I sent this to a friend who's pretty, I don't know, oddly enough, oddly brilliant. And he's like, do you know when the last time May 10th happened on a Tuesday? He looked it up. Anyways, a lot of details in here. I picked this shot too because I think this is one of my favorite photos of me. I think not photos, excuse me. This is one of my favorite drawings of me. The way he captured my look and my hand. Eli's particularly, I think, exceptional at drawing hands. It's one of the things he's known for. But I just love that shot. And of course, I love this shot, Peter walking out. And I don't know if you caught the little art in the background, Peter.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I want that. I would like to actually have that hanging back behind me. So
it's that Cam Neely from the Bruins. Is that shot but you threw some wings on it?
No. So it's the Bobby Orr,
Sorry,
famous Bobby Orr trip, and he just threw some wings on my back. But it's supposed to be the Bobby Orr picture with wings. Yeah.
Sorry, Bobby Orr,
so if you don't know, I am an unbelievable hockey player. So it's.
Yeah, and I'm embarrassed. I got the wrong hockey player. Don't stone me for that, anybody.
Yeah. That's kind of messed up. You didn't get it. But yeah, no, it's the artwork, the feet up on the desk, just not paying attention. Everything about. I do love that at every shot of her, she's playing with something different. that I just enjoy that. It's just like, look at the fidget spinner, the Rubik's Cube, and the little clacky things. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a real, like, we hand a lot over to Eli. Like, we've got the script and we've got all the idea, and he's just great at kind of creating the visuals and coming up with nuance like that, Rubik's Cube, fidget spinner, got all the ball clacker over here. Like, those are all Eli's gems.
Yeah, but and again, go back to your hand things. I think the hand placement on the Rubik's Cube, on the fidget spinner, like Eli's, the way you can see it's a gesture. Like, I always make fun of those things. The gesture, you can see he's kind of hand gesturing as he's talking, trying to ask the question. It just is. It's well thought out, and it's just it's really good artwork.
Yeah, we take it. It's taken for granted how exceptional the artwork is, how hard it is to do that, to capture the emotion altogether. So yeah, we're just just love what, the end result that Eli put together here. So that's our podcast for this week. Please like, share, comment, let everybody know about these comics. We got more coming,
Yeah.
and thanks.
Yeah,
for
let me
tuning in.
know. I changed the picture in the background. Let me know if you like this one. I found it in their storage. I just threw it up there, so let me know. All right. Good talk, Tom. We'll talk next week.
You too. Thanks, Peter. I'll see you.
Bye.